All right, what's going on, everybody? Hope everyone had a great weekend. We saw a great fight this weekend. I've been reading the comments, and not just for my content, but for others. And people really, really love this fight. Like I'm seeing all kind of comments. Like people are saying, like this is one of the best fights they've seen in a long time. This is the best fight they've seen since Katie Taylor and Amanda Serrano. It's definitely fight of the year so far. All right, I did actually go back and checked, and excuse me, just went over the schedule of the year so far, and definitely the fight of the year for me. So far. We still got a lot of year to go. Okay, we're not even, and technically we're not in May yet. We do have a big boxing weekend coming up, but this is absolutely the best fight of the year, and definitely one of the better fights that I've seen in recent years. I'm gonna go and say that. I think outside of the Benn family, because they lost a fight, I think it was a win for both in a way that, Conor Benn lost a lot of respect from the boxing public because of the failed drug test a few years back. And he went through a rough time. He went through the suspension and, trying to get his license back in the UK. And then he had a couple fights that weren't really big matchups, especially that first one against Roscoe. I think he fought down in like Florida somewhere, and it wasn't in front of a big crowd. It wasn't what he was used to, performing at, and to sell out this stadium, 67,000 people, with Chris Eubank Jr. and performing so well, being that he was a smaller guy. I think I think he's definitely earned a respect. People are still gonna bring up, what happened to him and stuff, but I think a lot of people are gonna respect because of the performance he put on. It was such a war, especially in the second half of the fight, and him being clearly a smaller guy in there. He showed a lot of heart, and he just went to war, and both of them did. Both of them did. It was a great fight. It definitely exceeded my expectations. And overall, in and out of the ring, I think everything went down perfect in that night, that fight. It was such a good fight. It was a perfect fight. And just all the drama leading up to the fight. Especially with me, like I felt, like I said in the press conference, when he was talking about his pain and the loss of his brother, and I'm talking about Chris Eubank Jr. Not being communicating with his dad. I think I think him showing up with his father was huge, you know, and just the respect. Like I even like rewatching it. I did rewatch it this morning. It's Monday morning, by the way. I rewatched it this morning just to see if I got that same feeling, but I also wanted to see if I noticed things that I didn't notice the first time I watched it. And I really liked how everything was just set up. Like I like the fact that the fathers were seated at the same table. I like how animated Chris Senior was in the ring, dancing and stuff. Like, it's funny because I really feel like the both of the sons, as I watch like all these clips that are on social media right now with the dads when they were younger. I only see like again, I didn't grow up watching the Eubank Benn. I wasn't watching the British fighters like that. Like I said in my live the other day, I grew up watching Lennox, Frank Bruno. It wasn't until like Joe Calzaghe, Carl Froch, and Ricky Hatton. Like I wasn't following Eubank and Ben when I was a young kid. And I don't know if their fights was getting televised here, but I did. With the internet, with YouTube, I did go back years ago and watched, their fight and Steve Collins and some of those other fights from their time that they were involved in, Iron Barkley fight. I watched them later, and there's a lot of history with them, and I love to see the clips where Eubank Senior is posting of his son as a younger kid, wanting the box. I've been watching that. I did watch their interview that they did sitting together a few times, but it's good to look at the history now. And I just wanted to add to that. I know it's all good between the Eubanks now, but the reason why this rivalry is so important, that now that the kids, or the sons, I call them kids, the sons are fighting now. The good thing about that, it's shining light on the dads on what they did for the people that don't know. My mom texted me. Well, she texted me, and I called her Sunday morning because she had watched the content, and she was like, I don't want to Google this. Just give me a history of all of this stuff with the sons and the fathers. It's just making people aware of who they are because of the sons are fighting today. And the son even did it bigger. They might have not been, you might not view them as talented as their fathers in their primes. I mean, their fathers definitely did more so far in their careers. Their careers is not over. But now they're doing it way bigger. If they're doing stadium fights in front of 67,000 people, they're doing it bigger, and I think looking at Chris Sr. and saying his son, what he did was disgraceful. I understand he didn't like some of the things, but he never liked this fight to begin with. But now that it happened, it's a win-win for both the Eubank and the Benn family because it's shining light on them and the history of how this fight came about. And I love it. I think it's dope. I think the whole thing is dope. I know I wasn't really a fan of a lot of it, and it's because, me being a diehard boxing fan, there was so many people that I wanted Eubank to fight over the years, so many top 160, 168 fighters, and he took a few good fights, but there's so many people that I wanted to see him face, he just wasn't a guy that was chasing all these titles and stuff. And some of these fighters are like that. He's kind of like how Ryan Garcia is. If I were to compare him, he's kind of like Ryan Garcia, and Conor Benn is turning out to be the same way. Like they're just gonna use their name to get big fights for big money, and this it is what it is. Not everybody's gonna chase belts, and sometimes I just gotta respect that. Especially when they're honest about it. That's the thing with Anthony Yard. I really, really like him. But at the end of the day, he's not going to be taking on these huge challenges each fight in and fight out. You know what I mean? He's going to have his tune-ups. He's going to stay sharp. And if a big fight comes around for the money that he wants, he'll take it. And I can't really hate on these guys that move that way because, I mean, this is a sport where people hate you today, love you tomorrow, hate you again the next day. You know what I mean? But there are fighters that I respect because they chase legacy. So I love that. But there are fighters that are just chasing the money. They're chasing the bag. They just want big fights. They understand that they have a big name. And there's some fighters that do both. There are certain fighters that do both. So yeah, I wanted to just say all of that, and I did rewatch the fight. I think maybe one round I might change. Eubank for one the first to me. I think Benn won the second and third. The fourth, fifth, sixth, and seventh I gave the Eubank. I gave the eighth and the ninth to Benn. The 10th round, which I originally had for Eubank, I think I'm going to change it to Conor Benn. And the last two rounds I gave the Eubank. I think the 10th round was the closest round of the fight, in my opinion. I think Eubank started out, using his jabs, his movement. I mean, I think overall Eubank is just a better boxer. You know what I mean? I think he's way more technical. Whereas Ben is much more agile, quicker, you know what I mean? explosive. But he's more limited compared to Eubank. I think Eubank has the better IQ, doesn't fight off his emotions as much. But I think Connor is pretty tricky, and he's so fast and explosive. And him being short, he knows how to get low and get in. The fight changed so many different ways in this fight. I think Ben was showing at times that he can really hurt Eubank, especially in that third round. But after the third round, Eubank just smartened up, and from the fourth to the fifth to the sixth, he just was just like, I was like, oh, Ben is letting this fight get away from him, because Eubank had started boxing so good, and once Conor Benn became more stationary, he started burning out. He became more stationary, and he was just an easier target to hit. And, going into the rematch, and I'm going to talk more about the rematch shortly, but I just think Conor Benn, moving forward, I don't know if he should change teams. I'm not going to sit here and tell him what to do, but I do think that there are certain things that he can adjust. I don't think he's old enough to not change and evolve. Being that he's very agile and explosive, and you don't want to wait until he gets too old to become like a boxer, but I think there are certain things he does need to adjust in his game, and I don't think he's relying solely off his speed and his explosiveness. He just wants to go in and knock you out, and that's fun. It's always one thing I said about Conor Benn is that he is always going to be fun to watch because he's so explosive. He likes to throw combination. He's like a bull. But like comparing him, like I was thinking like a Miguel Cotto, for example, who is very aggressive, goes to the body, likes to throw combination, but it's more about the setup instead of just recklessly doing it. You know what I mean? And I think like if somebody can just tweak him a little bit to work, like the second and third round, like he has a very good jab. And being that Eubank was the rangier guy, you know what I mean? Like he just was better at fighting that way. Connor was able to step in at times and make more of a use of his jab in those couple early rounds. And I was like, you know what I mean? Like I can see where he can, if he had a little bit more patience, and if he were to set up the shots a little bit more and not rely on just slipping and getting low and just charging in. If somebody can tweak him a little bit to where he can fight more patient and be able to set up these big shots instead of just throwing them wildly the majority of the time. Sometimes he could be smart, but it's rare. It's like a flash of it, you know what I mean? Some punches is just like he's so eager to throw that power, and we saw that in the what's the fight? Hold on, I'm gonna tell you right now because I don't want to miss this point. The fight where he basically Adrian Granados. Okay, I just remember. Sometimes it's like fights like those where you're just trying to land a bomb, and all your opponent is doing is moving and slipping and moving out of the way. You know what I mean? I just think that he can evolve, and I hope he does it before he starts aging, like his body starts aging. Where he can't move the way that he's moving right now. If you're starting to change by 4 rounds in the fight and you're already starting to slow down, and because of the movement, you can't maintain that movement, which was part of my prediction. Only thing I picked Eubank to win, but I thought Eubank was going to be able to stop him because of everything we saw in the second half. I thought Eubank was going to use his size and outwork him at the end, box early, and then be more physical at the end. I just didn't expect Conor to be so durable at that second half, like the way he was. But yeah, I think if he is tweaked a little bit, I think he can have more success It's just that as great as this fight was, it took a lot out of them. It took a lot out of the both of them. I mean, there was so much. It was such a war. Both of them, received a lot of damage. We all saw Connor's face blown up after the fight. Chris Eubank went to the hospital. I don't even think we had an interview with Chris Eubank since the fight. I think someone from his camp, someone representing him, went public and said that there's no truth behind him having a broken jaw. But I know when I was live, I said something was off with him in a post-fight interview. I know he did the interview and everything, but there was a point where, I think something was a little off with him. Okay. With that being said, the rematch. I made a post-fight recap video right after the fight the other night, and I said, I was bringing up different options. I know Conor Benn brought up Mario Barrios possibly going back down to 47 and fighting him for a title. I was naming some options for him. Guys at 47, guys at 54. Whether he's going to stay at 160 or not. Man, I'm gonna be honest, man. Turkey Al-Sheikh has already come out and said it, but even without him saying that, I slept on it. I was like, man, what are we talking about? Like, these guys just sold 67,000 tickets in the stadium fight. People are calling this the fight of the year. You know what I mean? I mean, it's all over social media. People are still talking about it. I mean, we have a big weekend of fights coming up, and no one's talking about that right now. Everybody's still talking about Conor Benn and Chris Eubank. They're going to have the rematch. Like I said in a post-fight recap, Chris is a fool if he agrees to a rehydration clause again, which gives Conor even more of a disadvantage because Chris was clearly taller and, not just bigger than him. You know what I mean? And now that he won the fight, I think that to agree to those terms would be crazy for him to do. I know he's the bigger guy and stuff, and the advantages, and you want to give a guy that's coming up to some sort of advantage, but if they want the rematch, if I'm Team Eubank, I would probably say I'm not doing a rehydration clause. And I know that would be harder for Eubank to win the fight because now Eubank would be an even less drained version of himself. But at the end of the day, it's why give away any advantages, in such a close fight? You know what I mean? Benn proved in this fight that he can at least buzz Eubank. There was a few of those punches that landed throughout the fight where it had Eubank on shaky legs. You know what I mean? So, yes, Eubank was the bigger guy. He outworked him at the end. He pushed Conor back. He buzzed him with some good shots too. But I seen Eubank at moments where his legs looked unsteady, and I can't see him giving him that advantage going into a rematch. But I can't see neither one of them walking away for all that money that comes with the rematch. I think in a rematch, those things that I pointed out about Benn, if he is to learn how to pace himself a little better, I think he does better. But I also think that if Eubank doesn't agree to a rehydration clause, I think he's only going to be stronger. And they both have the experience of fighting each other now. But I think the clearest rounds to me were the 4th to the 6th rounds for Eubank, or maybe even the 7th. Those rounds there made me believe that there was a gap in talent between the two. You know, now I know the rest of the fight, it was a war. And after that seventh round, I know Chris Eubank decided to go to war. Conor had been very aggressive. I think he had caught a second win. He was coming in, throwing some combos, and I think Eubank decided to welcome that kind of fight. And that was fun to watch. But if Eubank decides to pull like a Floyd Mayweather against Maidana rematch, where he decided to like, okay, I'm not going to go to war with this guy this time. I'm not going to keep my back to the ropes. I'm going to actually box him the whole time. I could see this fight being not as entertaining. You know, if I see Eubank box the way he did in those middle rounds, I can see where it can be a wide decision or possibly a stoppage. You know, it really depends on what he wants to do, because he didn't have to go full war mode in the eighth round with Benn, which gave Benn the advantage for some time. All right. At the end of the day, Benn did well, but that size and that experience did play a part in this fight. Anyway, classic Eubank event, or classic British event, period. Definitely an instant classic. I enjoyed watching it again this morning. I've been watching Instagram, social media posts on these two for the last 2 days, and it's been really entertaining. But, you know, congratulations to both. I think they won a lot of fans over, you know, and that's what I was trying to say. I think they won a lot of fans over. You know what I mean? Some people are still going to feel how they feel about them, which is fine. But I think there are a lot of people that after watching that, that's how you win the fans back. When you fight like that, when you give that much, put that much and leave it all in the ring like that, that's how you win the fights. I mean, it definitely lived up to the hype and the rivalry of the fathers, especially them wearing the trunks, the same color trunks and all of that. I think that all of that was great, you know, especially the bond of the both fathers supporting their sons. I think all of that was dope. All right. But yeah, the rematch is going to happen. No other fight really makes sense. As far as money, again, there's no big names at 60 for Eubank. There are more names down at 47 for Conor. But a lot of those guys at 47 that's moving up are the guys with the big names. You know, I think Jaron Ennis has probably got the biggest name at 47. But he's not fighting Jaron Ennis. You know, if you win a fight and mention Mario Barrios first, we already know what that's all about. You know, Mario Barrios right now looks like the weakest link at 47. You got Brian Norman Jr., who's not that known. You know, at the end of the day, I mean, you do have Virgil Ortiz at 54, who I mentioned the other night. But right now, the big money fight looks like a Eubank rematch. We just got to wait and see what are going to be, you know, what's up with the weight. That's the only question I have. Rematch is on the way, though. All right. So anyway, I want to move on from that. We have a big fight weekend. I'm gonna do some breakdowns, but I think the clear, big, most 50-50 fight for me over the weekend is probably Teofimo Lopez against Arnold Barboza. I think that is the fight where I'm probably gonna do that breakdown first, because I think that's the best matchup. Everything else is like, All right. Anyway, I'll see you guys on the next one. Please subscribe to the channel, smash the like button, share the video. Have a good day. Peace.